Okay, I guess we can begin. Good afternoon. My name is Pat Wong. I'm the manager of the Indoor Exposure Assessment section at the CARB. Welcome and thank you all for joining us today for the workshop on the draft Wildfire Smoke Clean Air Center grant guidelines, which are associated with AB 836.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Pat Wong y les quiero dar la bienvenida y agradecerles por participar esta tarde en el taller público respecto al borrador de las directrices de subvención del Centro de Aire Limpio para el Humo de Incendios Forestales que están asociados con AB 836.
This meeting is being interpreted in Spanish and recorded, and I'd like to introduce our two interpreters today, Sergio and Ryan. I would like to also mention that Yuri Lang is operating Zoom and taking care of the Zoom chat box. Now, in the chat, I'm sorry.
Esta reunión está siendo interpretada al español y también grabada. Y me gustaría introducir a nuestros dos intérpretes de hoy, Sergio y Ryan. También quiero mencionar que Yuri Lang está operando la plataforma de Zoom y estará al tanto y pendiente del chat de la plataforma.
The links to the slide for today's presentation is available in the chat box. Please download the slide if you want to watch those offline.
Los enlaces para las diapositivas de la presentación de hoy están disponibles en el chat. Favor, descargue las diapositivas para tener acceso a ellas posteriormente.
Jeffrey Williams will now go over the Zoom housekeeping issues and also how to turn on the interpretation services in more detail later in the presentation.
Jeffrey Williams ahora revisará los puntos a seguir con la plataforma de Zoom y también cómo encender los servicios de interpretación en más detalle posteriormente.
Thank you, Pat. And before we get started, I'm going to go over some housekeeping items for navigating Zoom.
Muchas gracias, Pat. Y antes de empezar, voy a repasar algunos puntos clave de cómo utilizar Zoom.
As Pat said, today's workshop will be presented in English and with Spanish interpretation. So I'll start off with a brief explanation about how to configure Zoom settings to enable the interpretation service. Please note that we've not enabled the interpretation channel yet, so the icon is not going to show up on your screen until we actually start the service.
Primero, la presentación de hoy se dará en inglés con interpretación al español. Empezaré con una breve explicación de cómo configurar la plataforma de Zoom para habilitar el servicio de interpretación. Favor, tomen en cuenta que aún no hemos habilitado dicho servicio, entonces el icono no aparecerá en su pantalla hasta que lo iniciemos.
So to listen to the language interpretation, in your meeting controls, click Interpretation, and it's located at the bottom of the screen. And it's shaped like a globe that you can see on the right.
Bueno, para escuchar la interpretación de un idioma, favor fíjese que en los controles de la reunión podrá hacer clic en Interpretación. Esto se puede localizar en la parte inferior de la pantalla y se ve como un globo terráqueo.
Click the language that you would like to hear. For this meeting, you'll have English and Spanish as your options.
Haga clic en el idioma que desee escuchar. Para esta reunión va a poder ver la opción de inglés y la opción de español.
If you'd like to hear only the interpreted language, then you can click Mute Original Audio to silence the language you do not wish to hear.
Para escuchar solo el idioma interpretado, por ejemplo, el español, podrá hacer clic en Mute Original Audio o silenciar el audio original y así solo oír el idioma interpretado.
So we'll now activate the interpretation function on Zoom, and you should see the interpretation globe icon appear at the bottom of your screen. And I'll give those of you who wish to enable the interpretation function just a few moments to switch over. So wait just a few seconds here.
Voy a habilitar el servicio de interpretación ahora. Podrán hacer clic en eso y les voy a dar unos segundos a aquellos que querrán activar dicho servicio.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and we'll move on to the remaining Zoom items. So before we get started, just want to talk a little bit about how to mute yourself. We ask that you do mute yourself and make sure that your name is showing as your screen name. If you wish to rename yourself, it's easy to do. Just click on the top right side of your picture video icon. And then we ask that you use the following naming convention. It'd be the first name, last name, and then your affiliation. So for example, I would be Jeff Williams -CARB. You can use initials such as CSC for, say, Community Steering Committee member. Also, let us know if you're from a community organization or what agency or air district, et cetera, that you might be from. If you need any help, please use the chat function to request assistance. Okay, next slide. Just to get yourself a little oriented to Zoom, again, the mute, unmute function is at the bottom of the screen. We do, again, ask you to remain on mute unless your name has come up in the speaking queue, in which case we will unmute you. For Zoom, the unmute and mute button is at the bottom left-hand on your screen. If you're calling on the phone, dial *6 to mute or unmute. And next slide. Video, very similarly, if you click the camera icon at the bottom left of your screen, you can toggle your video on and off. Now, if you wish to speak, we ask that you use the raise hand function to be added to the speaking queue. So to raise your hand, click on the reactions at the bottom of your screen, and then click on the raise hand icon. We'll also ask those on the phone if they have questions, so that we can unmute them to ask questions. If you're done asking your question, we do ask that you again click the raise hand to lower your hand. As far as chat, click on the chat icon near the center bottom of your screen, and you can use that to send a message and chat to all of the attendees here in the conference, or you can send a one-on-one private chat by selecting in the to section where it says you can see everyone. If you click, that'll provide a drop down with individual names, and you can select the individual that you would like to chat with. Just keep in mind though that the private chats are also archived, and we are recording the meeting. Okay, that's it, and I will hand it back to Pat now.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Like Jeff said, the recording will be available on our website shortly after the meeting. Links to the posted version of both the English and Spanish copies of the presentation will be provided in the chat. For your information, the chat feature will be monitored for questions. If you're having technical difficulties, you can let us know through the chat. If you have questions after this meeting or want to respond to poll questions, you can also submit questions via email by sending your questions to wscac@arb.ca.gov. A link to this email account is being put up in the chat box. If you're having any trouble with your computer audio, please try calling into the meeting using the number in the meeting invitation. Although we have been working hard to adapt to this new virtual meeting format, we apologize in advance for any unforeseen technical challenges and appreciate your patience. I will now hand it over to Bonnie Holmes-Jen, the branch chief of the Health and Exposure branch in the Research Division at CARB.
Thank you, Pat. Thanks, Pat. I'm Bonnie Holmes-Jen, and I am the branch chief at Health and Exposure Assessment branch, and we are the branch that is developing this grant program in the Research Division. And we're very excited to move forward with the Clean Air Center's workshops today and yesterday, and move forward with the grant program. And we hope to have the grant program in place as soon as possible. And during this fire season. And I wanted to thank the team, Pat and Jin Hook and Jeff and Ire, who you're meeting through this workshop, that have worked very hard, working together with their districts and others in putting together the draft guidelines that we'll be reviewing today. And I wanted to introduce Elizabeth Shealy, our Research Division Director, who's going to be kicking off the workshop with some opening comments and talking to us about the importance of the Clean Air Centers program as we're facing the wildfire season.
Thanks,
Elizabeth?
Bonnie. Thanks, Bonnie.
Mhm.
First and foremost, I just wanted to thank everybody for participating today and providing feedback and input on what we're going to present on the guidelines and commenting on the grant guidelines that we developed in collaboration with CAPCOA and the air districts pursuant to AB 836. Obviously, this is a really important program to CARB. We've seen increasing exposure to wildfire smoke over the last few years. And so this really recognizes the importance of setting up these clean air centers and protecting public health, protecting people from the increasing amount of wildfire and exposure to wildfire smoke, as well as other smoke events. Exposure to wildfire smoke affects everyone, but especially individuals with respiratory and cardiac illnesses and those in vulnerable communities. Over the past few months, CARB has developed the draft guidelines with input from representatives of the local air districts and CAPCOA. And I really want to recognize that partnership and the hard work that went into that. And we are holding these workshops to get additional input from others and roll out the program before fire season starts in full force, and hopefully get some of these clean air centers in place, and excited about the opportunity of working with communities throughout the state to do that. At today's workshop, we'll provide an overview of the draft guidelines and answer questions that you may have about the program. In addition, it's an opportunity to provide comments and feedback that will assist us in finalizing, making changes to the guidelines moving forward. So once again, thank you. We look forward to the conversation, to hearing from y'all, and I will turn it back over to Pat.
Thank you, Elizabeth. At this point, Jin Hyuk Ha, who is the lead staff for the program, will now present an overview of the new pilot grant program. He will cover program background, timeline, and also details of the draft grant agreement, which have been posted online. After the presentation, we will have time for questions and answers. So, Jin Hyuk.
Hello, this is Jin Hyuk. I work in the research division at CARB. I'd like to present the overview of the draft grant guidelines today. Yeah, so this slide shows what I'm going to cover. I'm going to start with the program background, and then I'll present the important parts of the draft grant guidelines. Then I'll share the timeline of this grant program, which will complete my presentations. And we'll have time for Q&A and discussion. Let me get started. So we would all agree that wildfires have become a serious public health and safety issue in California. Probably we all experienced catastrophic wildfires in recent years. The satellite images on the right-hand side were taken last year. Most parts of the state have been blanketed by wildfire smokes. In 2020, the last year, we had the most devastating wildfire season on record. Over 4 million acres of land were burned, and about 10,000 buildings and facilities were damaged or destroyed. Wildfire smokes have a variety of particulate matter and toxic air pollutants. They are known to cause various health effects including premature death. The new grant program that we are discussing today is created to protect vulnerable populations from these wildfire smoke and other air pollution events in California. Let me tell you a brief history of this program. Following the catastrophic wildfires that blanketed the Bay Area region for almost a week, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District worked with Assembly Member Buffy Wicks in Oakland to sponsor the Assembly Bill 836 to fund air filtration improvement projects and to establish a network of clean air facilities to help address serious wildfire smoke events in the future. The bill was signed in October 2019 to create this grant program with $5 million in total funding. It designated CARB as the administrating agency. The goal of this pilot program is not only to provide funding for building clean air centers in underserved areas, but also to help us learn the best practices for possibly building a future statewide network of clean air centers. So CARB, as the grant administrating agency, has been developing the grant program guidelines this year in close consultation with many air districts and other stakeholders. We posted the draft guideline document last week on the program website. The grant guidelines lay out how the grant program is going to be operated. It has information about program eligibility and priority, project requirements, and grant application and award process. It also specifies the requirements for project completion and reporting. We are still developing the application forms for the program, but the guideline shows that what information is going to be needed in the forms. This slide shows the framework of the AB 836 grant program. CARB is in charge of the overall grant operation, including grant guidelines development and grant allocation. The $5 million funding is allocated to the 3 air districts shown on this figure, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, and South Coast Air Quality Management District. It also allocates the funding to CAPCOA. California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, or CAPCOA, is a nonprofit association of air pollution control officers from all air districts in California. CAPCOA is going to run the program for the areas that do not belong to the 3 air districts. Under this scheme, funding becomes available to communities across the state. The 3 air districts are responsible for application solicitation, review, and approval for areas under their jurisdiction. CAPCOA does the same role for all other air districts on behalf of them. The grant guideline includes the budget allocation shown on this slide. The Bay Area is allocated with $3 million, San Joaquin with $350,000, and the South Coast with $250,000. The remaining $1 million is managed by CAPCOA for all other air districts. The funding allocation was made in close consultation with air districts and CAPCOA. The grant supports 3 types of projects. One is facility ventilation upgrades. The grant supports weatherization and HVAC system upgrades so that the facilities can run their ventilation system with high efficiency air filters. Second, for those with HVAC system that can already handle high efficiency air filters, the grant program supports the purchase of high efficiency air filters. Portable air cleaner purchase is another option, as it is hard to predict where the next wildfires would happen. Air districts, cities, counties, and emergency relief organizations like Red Cross can purchase a pool of portable air cleaners so that they can be deployed to create ad hoc clean air centers, the clean air centers on an ad hoc basis. So flexibly wherever a wildfire smoke emergency happens. This slide shows the list of eligible applicants. They will include, but are not limited to, schools, community centers, senior centers, sports centers, and libraries. These facilities would be already serving lots of residents in their communities. So once their HVAC systems are upgraded for clean air centers, they would provide clean air in their normal operation as well as during wildfires, improving public health all the time. I'd like to mention that it is hard to predict where wildfires would happen and how severe they would be. And as the grant program also has to cover the entire state, the grant guidelines were designed to give a lot of flexibility to air districts and CAPCOA so that they can build clean air centers according to their needs and local circumstances. The grant applicants are required to meet two minimal eligibility. This is the first one, this requires documented cumulative smoke burden in the past. The first condition requires the area that applicant is located in, the facility is located in or serving, must have the unhealthy record of air quality index. As you may know, air quality index, or AQI, is a common metric that public agencies like CARB or Federal Environmental Protection Agency uses to measure and report air quality. The category of unhealthy or worse has an AQI value greater than 150. The second condition is an example of flexibility in the guidelines, as I mentioned. We allow air districts to identify high smoke areas based on smoke health advisory notices in the past, so that some districts can decide the eligibility depending on local conditions, which are not necessarily captured by AirNow index values. The second eligibility criterion is that the facility must be in or serve vulnerable populations. We tried to make the definition of vulnerable populations very inclusive. It includes AB 617 communities and communities served by a low-income school. It also includes SB 535 communities defined by areas among the most disadvantaged 25% areas based on analysis done using a tool called CalEnviroScreen. Tribal facilities are also eligible. In addition, air districts and CAPCOA can decide any community based on relevant information in consultation with CARB. You can find more exact definitions of these communities in the grant guidelines. As the goal of this new grant program is to create a pool of clean air centers to provide respite from smoke events in vulnerable communities, the grant will be prioritized to applications that would help achieve this goal efficiently. So it'll be prioritized to facilities that are close to and easy to access for vulnerable populations, and that those that have a reasonable capacity to meet potential needs in their community. It'll also be prioritized to facilities that can do the necessary upgrades easily and cost effectively. Grant application process is briefly described on this slide. The grant application, the grant applicants will have chances to learn more about the application process in detail later. Before grant solicitations get started, air districts and KEPCOA will host public meetings to provide more details on the application process and to receive input from the public. I just want to provide an overview of the process here. The application forms will be made available on the program website. After air districts and KEPCOA host public meetings on assisting applications, they will start soliciting applications. CARB will review all the applications before air districts and KEPCOA decide final grant awardees, just to make sure that all the applications meet minimum eligibility criteria. And there will be a time requirement imposed on the grant projects. Once the grant is awarded, the project must be completed within 24 months, including the submission of the final reports. As this program is a pilot program, we are also requiring operation and assessment reporting so that we can learn from this program to inform potential future funding decisions. The grant recipients are required to submit an annual operation report for 5 years. The report will include the description of air pollution episodes, such as PM 2.5 or ozone concentrations, and or air now air quality index values. It'll also include the dates and hours of the center operation or portable air cleaner deployments. And it'll also include the estimated number of people protected at the centers. In addition, after the 5 years, the 3 air districts and KEPCOA are required to submit an assessment report on the program, which would include the overall description of clean air centers, evaluation of the program, recommendations on facility selection, facility upgrade, facility operation, and public outreach. This slide shows the rough timeline for the program. After the workshop, we'll address all the comments and finalize the grant guidelines very soon. Then CARB will sign grant agreements with the 3 air districts and KEPCOA. Once the grant agreements are done, air districts and KEPCOA will have to follow their processes to get this program approved by their boards, and they will also have to prepare themselves to get this program up and running. Then soon, air districts and KEPCOA start to operate their allocated funding, probably, hopefully in the fall of this year. As projects are required to be completed within 24 months, we expect most project will be completed in 2023. So this completes my presentation. Thank you everyone for listening. And I'd like to take a chance to thank all the stakeholders giving us thoughts and comments on the draft grant guidelines. And now I can pass it back to Pat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jin Huck. And if you do have some questions, you can either raise your hand, I guess those of you in the participant list, or also you can type in your questions in the chat box. While we are waiting for people to do that, Bonnie is going to have some, I guess, some summary remarks right now.
Hi there, Pat, and all. Thank you. I just wanted to note, based on some discussion that we had yesterday, just as you saw in Jin Hook's presentation, there's been a great deal of work to make sure that we are presenting a draft program that provides a lot of flexibility to the air districts to develop centers that best serve their communities. And we've tried to follow the requirements in the bill while providing this flexibility. But the bill is very clear about the kinds of facilities that should be funded, which are those retrofits and upgrades of ventilation systems that would mitigate adverse public health impacts due to wildfires and other smoke events. So it's clear in the it's clear in the guidelines, and we want to just make sure for the discussion that we're clear that the equipment to be funded will be equipment that can demonstrate a direct benefit to indoor air quality in the clean air centers. And we can provide some examples of that kind of equipment if that would be helpful. So I will turn it back to Pat for more questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Bonnie. Yeah, I do see a number of questions, both in the chat box and also the participant list. The first one that I saw was from Joe Hostler, and the question is there a list of approved HEPA filter units, specifically mobile, or I assume you mean portable units? Now, for the program itself, we do not have like a list of approved units that you can use. Basically, anything you can purchase in California is eligible. We do, just by the fact that we are in California, there is a air cleaner certification program, and so those must be on the list in order to be purchased. So that's my answer for whether or not. Again, we don't have a list of portables for this project, but it has to be make sure it is certified by CARB. I see a question from Anando Mukherjee, and I'm sorry if I did not say your name correctly, from I believe, I don't see anymore. Oh, from Sonoma Technologies, and I guess we can unmute you and you can come up with your question. Anando? Okay, I guess we can go back to Anando later on. Oh, yes.
So Joe asked one more question.
Oh,
if a
okay.
tribe outside
the tribe questions from Joe as well. Okay. Yeah, if a tribe, thank you, Jinho. If a tribe outside of the 3 districts were to apply, do we go through the local air district or through CAPCOA? I believe you would go through CAPCOA, and Jinho, you could
yes,
that?
it is. Yeah. So the air district, if a tribe outside, if a tribe is located outside the 3 air districts, they would go through the CAPCOA.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Naveed Paidar. The question is, has any consideration been given to coordinate with electric utilities on where they are siting their community resource centers during the public safety power shutoff? PS often coincides with wildfires. And in terms of the program, no, we have not coordinated with them. I would expect possible coordination maybe from whoever is running the emergency coordination, that be it either the air district, the city, or the county, and hopefully they will coordinate with the PS. But yeah, we do not have any coordination with the PUC on that. or the, sorry, the CRCs with that. We would expect a coordination from the locals, definitely. Let's see. I guess Anando Mukherjee, could you, I guess, unmute yourself and ask your question? Your hand is still raised.
Hi, yes, this is Ananda Mukherjee from Sonoma Technologies. Thank you, CARB, for this very helpful presentation. And my question was on the reporting requirements regarding the Clean Air Center operation and assessment reports, specifically the reporting of the air quality episodes. I was wondering if that refers to indoor or outdoor or both, and what type of data or what type of, how you envision that reporting requirement.
Okay, thank you for that question. I believe we are just requiring just the outdoors because that is what can be looked up and I guess for each area. However, if you do have the ability to look at the indoors, we would love to have that as well, just for informational to see how well the population is protected. And I'm sorry, was there a second part of that question? Hello?
This is Bonnie. I just would say on the reports that we're just trying to collect information to help us better understand how the facilities were used and what was the severity of the pollution issues that people were dealing with during the wildfire emergencies and when they were using the clean air center. So we're just trying to compile some basic information to better understand the use of the program, the conditions people are experiencing, and help us plan for the future. So that's the basic purpose of it.
Okay, thanks, Bonnie. Yeah, I'd like to add that since this is a pilot program, we would like to get as much information as possible. So along with possible monitoring information, we would like to know what hours the facilities open, how many people utilize the facilities at that time. So any information would be good, but I guess at minimum, we just want the number of people and the outdoor air quality at the time.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Bonnie. That answers my question.
Okay, do we have any other questions from the participants? Okay, and any more online?
Pat, can I suggest that you just run through quickly the short list of the types of equipment that could be purchased with the funding?
Well, the equipment would be definitely, depending on which part of the program you use, portable air cleaners that could be deployed if that's the type of project you're talking about. Other possible upgrades which are eligible for funding are filtration upgrades, HVAC ventilation system replacements, improvements in weatherization. Basically, the criteria we're looking for the type of upgrades is that whether a project will have a direct effect on improving indoor air quality would make it eligible. Okay, it looks like we have a question from, and I'm sorry if I say your name incorrectly, Nish Krishnamurthy. I guess, can we unmute Nish?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, you got it right. So yeah, hi, my name is Nish Krishnamurthy. I am an air quality specialist at South Coast AQMD, where I help implement the community emission reduction plan for the East LA, Boyle Heights, West Commerce, AB 617 community. And one of the air quality priorities of the community is to reduce exposure to air pollution at sensitive receptor sites, so like schools or libraries, community centers, right? So just where vulnerable populations congregate. And one of the actions of the SERP is to help, apply for incentive funds for air filtration systems at these facilities. And, so over the past few years, 2 years now, we've done like, what do you call it? Like, we've applied for incentive funds for school air filtration systems, which very well go, can cost up to like, 200 to 300K for an air filtration system for a high school, for example, right? But like, I noticed in the funding that was allocated for AQMD or for South Coast AQMD, it was only about 250K. And so I was wondering, like, if that funding is kind of like, if you envision, at least for the South Coast community, for that funding to go more towards like these, like the portable air filtration systems, and for more like upgrading air filtration systems rather than entire like replacements of existing, replacing or upgrading existing air filtration systems at these community centers, where I imagine, would serve as the an air or what do you call it? Air pollution center. Sorry, I forgot the term.
Clean air centers.
Yeah, clean air centers. That's right.
Okay, well, yes, I do know the approximate cost. Normally for like these schools, they can be, over $100,000. I think the allocation to South Coast AQMD would be probably, I would guess, probably smaller type projects. There's not a cap on the cost of projects, but with that funding amount, I would envision either like smaller centers, like maybe possible, some of the facilities mentioned, although it's not limited, are like libraries. You could be like upgrading maybe the cafeteria or gymnasium portion of a school, the part that would actually be used as a cleaner air shelter. So yeah, I guess that's going to be up to the air district to decide how they would like to, spend their funds over there.
Gotcha. Second question for the reporting requirement, does the South Coast do the air districts have to do that on behalf of the grant recipients, or does the grant recipient, for example, like a school or a community center, would they write the report?
Well, what we are envisioning is like two levels. There will be an annual report which the facilities or the organizations would be sending to the air district, such as South Coast, which you are at, and then the air district would compile those and send those to CARB. Now, after about 5 years of the program, the air districts and CAPCOA would be writing a report on just kind of a summary over the past 5 years, the facilities, what worked, what didn't, just the best practices, which hopefully we can use to look beyond the current pilot program.
Gotcha. Oh, sorry, just to be clear, is the funding amount on an annual basis, or is it is the funding amounts that you mentioned, is that for total for 5 years?
Yeah, we wish it was an annual basis, but no, it's right now it's a pilot program and it was allocated $5 million total right now.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Okay. I guess there is a question from Naveed Paydar. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. What kind of outreach is being done to local emergency responders and other eligible participants to know about this great program? Well, thank you for saying it's a great program. We intend to have, there is a plan to have workshops at, I believe, 3 of the districts that were allocated funds, which CARB will be involved with. And we are hoping that there will be outreach, or at least local outreach, done in those districts to emergency responders and eligible participants regarding this program. So we have not said anything yet, but the air districts know their people and their organizations better than we do. So when those get started, we would expect some outreach would be done.
Hey, Pat, this is Bonnie Holmes. I just want to add also that we'll be reaching out through our state to other state agencies, including this State Office of Emergency Services. So I really appreciate the commenter raising that point, and that we'll be reaching out also at the state level and through the state offices, hopefully also reaching local emergency response agencies.
Thanks, Bonnie. Okay, are there any more questions from participants? Not seeing any hands raised, and I am not seeing any in the chat. Is that correct, Yuri and Janelle? I'm not seeing anything.
Yeah, Pat, why don't you just bring up the timeline and maybe kind of run through the timeline again, now that we've had a chance to talk a little more detail about the program. Maybe just kind of run through the next steps.
Okay, so the next step. So we'll mention it again, but after the workshops, we'll be expecting comments or suggestion on the draft guidelines. So please send us any comments or suggestion by the end of next week, June 25th. And so after receiving all the comments and the comments we received at the workshops yesterday and today, we'll be finalizing the grant guidelines. And once this is done, CARB will be signing contracts with air districts and CAPCOA. And then the air districts and CAPCOA will be working to get this program approved by their boards. At the same time, they will be working on preparing themselves to run this program. We'll closely work with them to make everything go smoothly. And then hopefully air districts and CAPCOA will be hosting the public meetings to kick off the grant program. The communities and other stakeholders and all the applicants will have another chance to weigh in their inputs into the application process at the workshops. Once that's done, like the air districts and CAPCOA will be soliciting applications, and they'll review all the applications with us, and then this grant awardees will be selected, and then the projects all the projects will be starting probably not all. It'll be starting in the fall, and then once the grant is approved, each applicant, each grantee will be finishing their project within 24 months.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. Again, I don't see any more questions either in the chat or raised hands, so I'd like to invite Bonnie to present some concluding remarks.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Pat. I just want to thank everybody for joining the workshop today. As we said, this is a one-time $5 million grant program at this point. But we're really excited to move forward with this grant program. And we think that it will provide a tremendous amount of protection for vulnerable communities that are dealing with smoke impacts. And we're working hard and working with our air district partners also very hard to try to get this program up and running as soon as we can. And we're all aware of the looming wildfire season that is unfortunately likely to unfold given the hot, dry conditions that we have. We've spent a lot of time working to develop guidelines that follow the requirements in the bill for developing a network of clean air centers, and that provide the opportunity for all parts of the state to participate in the program, while trying to provide flexibility for the air districts who will be administering the program and CAPCOA to make sure that they are able to select the centers and the locations and the equipment that will best serve their communities and provide accessibility to the vulnerable communities who are expected to be dealing with smoke exposures. We are very interested in having, in hearing and seeing all your comments that you have on the draft guidelines that have been discussed today by Jin Hook, and I think you have the links to the guidelines in the chat. So we invite you to send any comments in the next week, and we'll take them into consideration as we move forward. Thank you again, and I guess I'll turn it back to Pat to just check and see if there's any other comments or questions, and otherwise we'll close the workshop, and we'll then, as Pat mentioned, the next step will be after considering the comments, we'll be coming out with a final set of guidelines and the grant agreements with the district so we can move forward. It looks like there's one more question I'm coming up here.
Yeah. Pat, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you, Bonnie. Yeah, we do have one question from Tracy Lee at the Bay Area AQMD. The question is, does CARB plan on reviewing all the applications received prior to the districts approving the applications, or does CARB just need specific information regarding the applications received? I don't believe that CARB is going to review all the applications the district receives. However, after the district makes a decision for a particular facility or a particular application for approval, CARB will be looking at those applications to make sure they meet the minimum requirements and approving them before they can go forward. So we won't be reviewing all of them, but we would be reviewing the ones that the districts do select. Okay, and thank you for that question, Tracy. Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't see any more questions or hands up. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Also like to thank Jin Hook, Jeffrey, and Yirei of my staff for the workshop, and Bonnie and Elizabeth for their comments, and of course for Ryan and Sergio for their translation services. Again, just a reminder, if you have any questions, we will be taking questions and comments up to the 25th at the email that was shown over there. So I guess that will conclude today's workshop, and thank you all for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.